everyone, I'm Heather. I'm back for a really quick video, mainly because we've been in lockdown for the last couple of weeks. This is the last weekend of the lockdown, and I'm super bored, so let's talk about some books. I finished my first week of Indigathon and Nonfiction November, so I've got a couple under my belt for that I'll talk about, and also I'm working my way through some, and also some more on the horizon, the ones that I've set aside for next. And I'll give those like a chat. We'll have a chat about that. Also, I'm having like lunch, but actually it's just collections of Cafe Nero's new Christmas menu. So they've released all their Christmas stuff, and I can't remember if this is early in the year for them to have released all their Christmas stuff, or if it's like the normal time. Because like back home in America, things generally don't get Christmassy until after Thanksgiving. Like we have that sort of conveniently placed end of November holiday, which sort of is like a gate that holds Christmas back until December. But here in the UK, they don't have that. Really, the last holiday before Christmas is Bonfire Night, which is the 5th of November. So really after that, it sort of just leaves it wide open for people to have Christmas whenever they want. So I think generally it does start just roughly after Bonfire Night, and it's like 2 months of Christmas. So it may not actually be early that they've released it. It may just be the normal time. And normally I'm against it. Normally I'm like, no. If we have 2 months of Christmas, Christmas will lose its magic and we'll get tired of it. But because this year has just been an absolute trash fire, I'm just gonna allow it to happen. Like, woo! It's Christmas. Right now. Peppermint. It's the key. It's the key right there. That's the stuff. Okay. So, the first 2 books that I read that I've already finished. The first one was Highmat by Nora Krug. So originally, when I sort of talked about my TBR for Nonfiction November, I got it wrong, and I apologize. I thought that the woman who wrote this book was American or British or something, and her family was German, like maybe her parents or her grandparents or whatever were German, and she was sort of going to investigate that part of her family. But it turns out that the woman who wrote this is actually German. She just lives in America and has done for, you know, over a decade. And basically the book, so it's graphic memoir, is it? And it was really good and really interesting. I absolutely love this one, like 5 stars all the way. The woman, she's German, she's living in America, and she grew up post-war Germany. So her parents were born just after the war. And she's lived in America for a while, and it's sort of making her feel, you know, the way expat life makes you feel. I'm an expat, I completely understand. Like, it sort of sets you aside from the people in your daily life and sort of like gives you like an otherness to either embrace or reject, you know? It sort of sets you up to sort of make a decision about your identity. Something that people maybe don't always have to do. Like, they can just sort of go about their lives without thinking quite hard about their identity. Whereas in sort of an expat situation, it forces you to make an active decision about where you're gonna, you know, what parts of your identity you're gonna accept or reject. So she grew up in post-war Germany, in a time when, like, they're sort of still coming to terms with the war and like their role in the war. And there's loads of things like cultural and educational and everything that they've put in place, I don't know, to sort of make amends for the war or to make sure that the war doesn't happen again. And it sort of ends up sort of discouraging any sort of like pride or like strong national like German identity, like a feeling of Germanness and a pride in Germanness. And so it's sort of a whole generation of Germans growing up this way, and this woman moves to America and then sort of starts to identify herself as distinctly German against sort of the backdrop of all of the Americans, and sort of forces her to be like, I've never really had this feeling of like strong Germanness or like pride in Germanness, and I feel like it's wrong. I feel guilty when I have that because I feel like that's the kind of thing that caused us to have the war in the first place. but Americans feel so strongly about being American. They feel strongly, you know, identified as Americans. They feel really proud to be Americans. And as well as she comes up against groups of German Americans, so people who are actually American, but like their parents or their grandparents or whatever are German, and they feel really strongly proud to be German as well, of German heritage. And she feels really weird about that. Like, I don't know how I feel about that, but yeah, we do have great things in Germany. And she feels really homesick as well. She's like, I love Germany so much. I love my life in Germany. There's so many things about Germany I miss. Like, is it okay for me to feel German and like be proud to be German? And, you know, so she feels really deeply conflicted, and she's like, I need to go and find like the source of my guilt, you know. She goes back to Germany and she goes digging through her family's personal roles in the war. So she's looking for like evidence of her grandparents and if they were Nazi supporters, and anything that they did maybe to either sort of support the Nazi cause or to sort of like fight against it, any sort of like resistance thinking or things like that, just to sort of help her like come to grips with this conflict that she's having while living in America. And it was fascinating. This is something I just haven't really thought about that much before. Like, I was born in Germany, or West Germany, which just makes me feel old, even though I don't feel like I'm that old at all. But also I have German heritage. Like, my great-grandmother's last name was Schunke, you know? So, you know, at points down the line, my family is German, I suppose. And I really like Germany as a country. I've been there several times, and I never really thought about how maybe in this day and age, people who are actually German maybe aren't allowed to feel like that, feel like Germany's really good, or sort of feel pride in it, are super interesting. Not something I really thought about. And also her like delving into her family is really interesting, sort of finding evidence of like what her grandfather was doing like during Kristallnacht, you know, like when sort of everyone went through and sort of damaged all the Jewish shops and everything like that. Like, you know, the synagogue across the road from his office was burning, you know, like where was he? Was he on the road watching it? Was he trying to help someone while it was happening? Like, what was he doing? You know, is my grandfather part of it? Anyway, that was fantastic and I highly recommend, highly. Okay, so the next one I finished was Wilding by Isabel Tree. And I really liked this one as well. Like, I feel like I have accepted about myself now that I'm not really into nature writing. So I've read a couple of them now, and there's some things I liked about them. Like, I like animals. I like the parts about animals, but the parts about like plants and sort of foliage and stuff like that, I sort of like find myself switching off. I don't really care. But this one actually I really liked. The idea is that this couple, the author and her husband and her family, they owned this farm that basically went under. It was just completely not profitable anymore. It was really stressful. It was sort of just, they were holding it up, you know, desperately keeping it from going under. And they were just like, let's just let it go under, you know, there's nothing we can do. And they used all that land instead for a massive rewilding project. They got all these grants and like all these like scientific advisors and everything to sort of push the land toward, you know, sort of being reclaimed by nature and like various animals and plants and everything that would have sort of been there had it not been cleared so long for farming. And loads of fascinating things happen. Like, all these species that people thought were like near extinction and would never come back to Britain, you know, are sort of flooding in, and they're reintroducing all these like different kinds of animals that are then having like amazing knock-on effects for the sort of land as a whole and like the ecosystem and everything. It talks about other places where they've done things like the Netherlands and sort of America and everything, sort of the difference in thinking between British conservation and American conservation, and sort of things that they've done in Europe that could be done here with certain sort of changes or whatever situations, and like the difference in various sort of animal populations in places like Britain and continental Europe. I thought this was just really good. It was fascinating, and it's got good pictures. Like, they introduced deer and like the pigs as well, they brought back to their thing. Apparently they're not allowed to rewild wild boar because they're really dangerous. Like as they sort of died out, it's like, I imagine like the one animal where British people were like, oh, thank God. But apparently if they go wild on their own, they're allowed to be there. So if they sort of just wander into their land, that's sort of acceptable. They also talks about like what to do with like various Exmoor ponies, which is like really interesting. Anyway, I thought this was fantastic. This is really good. I would recommend that one as well, even if you're not really into nature sort of writing and stuff. That was really good. Okay, so the next ones are ones that I'm in the middle of reading at the minute. The first one is Paying the Land by Jo Sacco. And this one is one of the ones I'm reading for in Digathon. So it's about the Dene people who live in the Northwest Territories in Canada. So Jo Sacco, the guy who wrote it, he's not actually Indigenous, he's a white guy, but he wrote it about a trip he took to the Northwest Territories and sort of talks about their communities and sort of the complications and everything about sort of living in a world where their old ways are sort of dying off. And like they're trying to preserve them, but also they seem to be sort of embracing the sort of jobs and sort of economic boost and stuff that comes from the oil industry and sort of fracking and things like that. It talks about sort of like how cultures are changing, how they're sort of dying off, how they're trying to preserve them, how they tend to sort of feel about all these sort of new influxes of people coming in, or like jobs and political situations and stuff like that. And it's really good, yeah. Like it's graphic as well, a graphic memoir or whatever about the trip. And it's each page is just packed. Like it's like a mind explosion each page. It just has a gazillion different things to like look at and take in. So even though the boxes or whatever, they're not a lot of them, there's just so much information and like just creative explosion on each page. It's like a creative assault, and I really like it. Something that was really interesting, I thought, was sort of how the various tribes and sort of bits of the community have sort of broken off and started fighting each other in their sort of land disputes with the government, you know, sort of like trying to get the land that's theirs. Like in the 70s, they were really united in their sort of fight against the Canadian government to make sure that their land, you know, and their like rights to their land was recognized. But then sort of the Canadian government sort of played them against each other. And now they're sort of fighting each other as well and sort of trying to do negotiations for land just for their own tribes with the Canadian government instead of like standing together. I thought that was quite interesting. But also like the sort of interviews, they're sort of like how the interviews with elders and like people who used to live the old way is shown through this like graphic medium is really interesting. Like you have the person, you have them speaking, but also you have like side bubbles and things about the sort of memories that they're talking about, and I really like how it's portrayed. And I like sort of their descriptions of how they used to live as kids, like in the bush, doing the sort of like old methods of living. Anyway, I am really liking that one. I think it's really good, so I would recommend that one as well. I also, for the next one, I Succumbed to Weakness. The audiobook that I'm listening to at the minute was not on my original list for either of these readathons, but it came out and I bought it on pre-release because I'm weak. It's a new book called Clanlands by Graham McTavish and Sam Hewen. They're actors in the Outlander series. And the book itself that they've written. So they've written a book about sort of their travels through Scotland and everything, about like the clans and about, they each have like little bits where they talk about their lives and how they feel about things and like Scottishness and stuff like that. It's got a foreword at the beginning as well by Diana Gabaldon, who wrote the Outlander books and who knows them quite well. Like she sort of does like advisory stuff for the show or whatever, and has done for the past, you know, several years. And I'm loving it. Like, I didn't have it on my list originally. I think that I'm gonna end up like replacing one of my ones. Like, I think for the word buzz for Nonfiction November, I had Sex at Dawn, which I'm really excited about. I do really want to read. But also I think that I've just like accidentally replaced it with Clanlands because I don't know, I'm weak. I really wanted to listen to this one. It is really good as an audiobook. I don't know what it's like as a book, but as an audiobook, it like sounds like a podcast. So they both read it and they sort of interject with each other. Like one of them will say something and be like, nah, that's not true. It's like this, you know, like they do their conversations together. And it sounds like a podcast instead. And I'm really liking it so far. It is super cheesy. Like if you're not into Outlander, I don't know. But like, you know, if you're into Scottish history and sort of Scottish identity and like culture and stuff like that, I reckon you'd still like it. Particularly as like their banter is like okay, you know, like they're funny guys. Their banter's pretty good. Like I like them. I really like this one. It's really good. And if I don't get around to reading Sex at Dawn, you know, I'll feel sad. But also it was worth it. Okay. So next two coming up, I think, depending on what Tina says, my buddy reader. I've texted her. We'll see what she says. I've asked her, do we want to start a buddy read soon? If not, if she wants to do it a bit later, then I'll sort of replace it with something else. But I'm hoping that she'll be up for reading this soon. Don't Sleep There, Snakes. This is one of the ones that my husband recommended that I should read. It's about this guy who goes into the Amazon and meets this like sort of reclusive tribe of people and finds out that their language is completely sort of unknown. Like all the rules and everything for the language match no other language, you know, in the world. And sort of all of these language experts thought that no language could possibly function that way and stuff like that. So I like in the middle, it's got just like photos of members of the tribe. I doesn't really say anything about them except like their name and sort of like a little bit like a little blurb, like this person whose name to me obviously is completely unreadable. Maybe after I read the book I'll be able to sort of like know how to say that name. But he says, one of my oldest friends is in his 60s but is still full of vigor, humor, and a desire to talk about our experiences. And it just shows a bunch of them like that. I love that. It'll give me like, I like sort of like looking at them while I'm reading it as well. So like as I'm going through and I'm reading about the people, you can see their faces. Anyway, and the next one, as soon as I finish this audiobook, I'm going to replace it with another audiobook, which is an Indigathon one as well, called Tale of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse. I don't know a lot about this one, but it's sort of a fiction one to do with the Navajo land area, and it's sort of like sometime in the future when I think like America as a country has fallen and the Navajo reservation land, or like the sort of wider Navajo land, has become its own country, and now there are like magical monsters or something and like mythical sort of creatures or something that they have to battle, some sort of like magical thriller type thing. So I'm really excited about that one. Okay. If that's the end of my books for today. I stole this magazine for my kid. She gets these like kiddo National Geographics. It came in the mail today and she's not around to read it, so I've stolen it. And I've been looking through it and there's loads of book stuff in here. Like various like things about books and stuff. I just found this thing. Find your perfect Christmas read. Oh, yes, please. Thank you. Sort myself out. It's already November, you know. I'm eating Christmassy foods, you know. I might as well sort out my Christmas reading list. Right now, definitely. Okay, it's a quiz. It's a quiz mind, and then it's got my choices down the end. So we'll see now. Starts with, you fancy a read, so you pick up a book that's packed with tension and adventure, or fun, lighthearted, and a little bit silly. I'm gonna go with silly. It's Christmas, you know. This year's been like it's just a garbage fire. Like I'm really interested in just something lighthearted. So next question. What's more annoying? Someone eating the last slice of cake or really stinky feet? And I think, to be honest, don't mind about the cake thing. I'm vegan, I don't really like sweets. So I'm going to go with the foot thing. Even that I don't really mind, but you know, you got to pick one. So I'm going to go with stinky feet. Next question. You'd be happier playing with the latest gadgets or heading off on an adventure? And anyone knows me, I don't play with gadgets. Gadgets play with me. So I think I'll be heading off on an adventure. Where does that take me? It takes me to, do you prefer stories that are a little bit magical or based in the real world? Ooh, it's a bit of a toughie. I'm liking nonfiction November. You know, I like a bit of nonfiction. But I think when I read fiction, it's to escape my current reality. So I'm going to go with a little bit magical. What involves you more? Oh, What inspires you more? Getting lost in a good book or gazing up at the stars? I do like stars, but it's cold outside. Heckin' cold. So I'm gonna choose book. And it takes me to this one! That's actually really good. It's the Pages and Company ones. I don't know if you know about these ones, but it's like a series of books about this girl that can like go inside books and like move around and interact and stuff. And I've read the first two, so this is the third one. Just came out. I forgot about that. Tilly and the Map of Stories. The third installment in Anna James' exciting Pages and Company series celebrates all the best things in life. Books, adventure, friendship, cake. In this spellbinding story, the evil Underwoods are threatening the future of book wandering, and they have their sights set on Tilly. Leaving the safety of her family bookshop, Tilly heads to America to find the legendary archivist and save the day. Oh, that's gonna be good. Oh, loads of these look good. Oh, there's this one too. A Clock of Stars, the Shadow Moth. In this epic fantasy story, Imogen and her little sister Marie follow a strange silver moth through a door in a tree and find themselves falling into a magical kingdom. And this one, David Baddiel, Future Friend. The year is 3020 and Pip is lonely. She goes to virtual school on her G glasses. Only has her talking pets to hang out with and can't leave home thanks to the extreme climate. Is this 3020 or 2020? Then one day, a glowing ring transports her back to 2019 where she meets boy inventor Rahul. Can Pip's brand new buddy help her get back to the future and just maybe save the world? Oh, that looks good. These are the ones. So the Tilly one, and like the clock one, and like the future one. These look good. Okay, anyway, sorry, that has sidetracked me. That's basically the end. I apologize if this was like really long and rambly. But if you have any comments at all, please let me know. You know, if you like the books that I've sort of said about, if you've read them as well, if you have any thoughts about upcoming things, Christmas, whatever, please let me know. I'm in it for the comments, guys. I'll be honest with you. Okay, I will see you next time. Okay, bye. Bye.